Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. This is Budget Day in Canada. We chat with Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation to see how much more spending is being planned. A new bill is being proposed that would give the Alberta government even more power when it comes to health restrictions. John Carpe with the Justice Centre has the details. And history was made as a NASA helicopter became the first aircraft to take off and land on a planet other than Earth.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Today was Budget Day in Canada, the Liberals' first budget in 2 years and Chrystia Freeland's first since becoming federal finance minister. The Liberals skipped last year due to what the government said was uncertainty caused by the pandemic. Joining me now to discuss some of the budget details is Franco Terrazzano, Alberta Director with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, it looks like we're going quite a bit deeper in debt.
Yeah, we knew this was going to be bad news for taxpayers, but it's even worse than we thought. It's huge spending, huge deficits, and huge debt. And you know what? There is a ton of spending measures new in here that have nothing to do with COVID-19. So we're really seeing Minister Freeland use the cloud of this COVID-19 crisis as a way to jack up spending on non-related issues. I mean, we are going to see annual spending increase by $100 billion by 2026 with no plan on how to pay for it.
Now, word with this new budget as well is that spending will increase when it comes to childcare.
Well, the government thinks that we somehow have $30 billion to spend on a one-size-fits-all childcare program. Well, here's the thing, we don't. We didn't have this type of money when the government was doing massive deficit spending before COVID-19, and we certainly don't have the money for a huge, costly $30 billion one-size-fits-all childcare program now when we're looking at a $1 trillion plus debt problem.
Now, with the new budget, does that also mean the taxes will be going up on certain products?
Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised Canadians that he wouldn't be raising taxes, but despite that pledge, he will be raising taxes on tobacco, on vaping, on digital services, also on luxury goods. And you know what I think we're all worried about? This huge price tag on this budget for taxpayers and for future generations.
That was Franco Terrazzano, Alberta Director from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining me from Calgary. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says her budget will include emergency support benefits and creating some new ones, along with just over $100 billion in new spending to spur economic recovery, all of which Freeland says Canadians can afford.
This budget addresses three fundamental challenges. First, we need to conquer COVID. That means buying vaccines and supporting provincial and territorial healthcare systems. It means enforcing our quarantine rules at the border and within the country. It means providing Canadians and Canadian businesses with the support they need to get through these tough third wave lockdowns and to come roaring back when the economy fully reopens.
Freeland says the budget will include investing $2.2 billion to build back a homegrown drug treatment and vaccine industry, increasing old age security for seniors aged 75 and older, expanding the Canada Workers Benefit by investing $9 billion over 6 years for low-wage workers. It will also include just over $12 billion to extend the wage subsidy, rent subsidy, and lockdown support for businesses until September 25th. It will also include investing more than $6 billion for infrastructure in Indigenous communities. There are some serious concerns that a new bill, Bill 66 here in Alberta, will repeal the Public Health Act, giving Health Minister Tyler Shandro a broader range of powers. That would include giving individual penalties up to $100,000 for a first offense and $500,000 fines for subsequent offenses for anyone violating the Public Health Act. To discuss this in more detail is John Carpe, the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. Now, John, you say there are, however, two positive aspects of this new bill. What are they?
One is that it gets rid of the mandatory vaccination provisions that were in the Public Health Act, so that's a good thing. The other thing is that it corrects the error that was made 12 months ago when the Alberta government passed Bill 10, which gave the Health Minister, Tyler Shandro, as well as all cabinet ministers, the right to create new laws on the fly without any input from the elected members of the Legislative Assembly. This was horrific and contrary to 800 years of constitutional precedent. Laws are supposed to be passed by the legislature so that we the people can elect our representatives, and it's our elected representatives that pass the laws. So there's some accountability there, that we have at least an indirect say in the creation of the laws that we live under.
You also have concerns that Bill 66 will not only give Health Minister Tyler Shandro extra powers, but also our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Hinshaw. What specifically are your concerns?
There is no accountability for the Chief Medical Officer, currently Dina Hinshaw, politically appointed doctor, or whoever is Chief Medical Officer in future. They do not have to provide medical or scientific evidence to the legislature. They don't have to run any of their orders past the legislature. They can continue to run Alberta like a medical dictatorship, which is what we've been having for the past 13 months. This is now, I'm sad to say it, but this is a permanent loss of our charter rights and freedoms. This is not a temporary measure, because every time you hear a chief medical officer or a politician say temporary, it's not true. They've been saying that for 13 months. I mean, when does it cease to be temporary? So Bill 66 is going to further entrench there being a police state, medical dictatorship in Alberta, where we have one unelected, unaccountable doctor that is making laws for the entire province.
That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. By the way, Bill 66, which was introduced in the legislature on April 12th, is currently in the process of a second reading. A person suspected of tampering with a fence at Grace Life Church near Edmonton has been arrested. Police say they located the person outside of the church on Sunday, who they allege was one of the people involved with mischief and obstruction to the fence last week. A section of the fence was yanked down during a demonstration outside of the Spruce Grove Church on April the 11th. Organizers say people who did so were not part of the original rally. RCMP say the person was released with conditions that include staying away from the church and will appear in court on June the 30th. Alberta Mounties got their unicorn. A steel statue of the mythical beast that police say was reported stolen on Friday in the village of Delia was found Sunday in a field around 15 kilometers away. Police say the horn was broken off, and they've called in forensics experts to help figure out who stole the statue. The unicorn, which measures more than 3 meters high and weighs more than 270 kilograms, has an estimated value of around $10,000. A 10-day trial for a husband and wife accused of trying to smuggle drugs into Canada at the Coutts border crossing back in 2017 has begun. Canada Border Services Agency officers seized 84 bricks of cocaine weighing 99 kilograms from the cab of a truck bound for Calgary. Gurminder and Kurandeep Tour are each charged with drug smuggling and drug possession for the purpose of trafficking. A very sharply dressed Naveen Day was at the Lethbridge Courthouse and has the latest. Nav?
Thank you, Hal. At the time, it was the largest cocaine seizure recorded by the CBSA in Alberta's history. RCMP reported that the drugs were worth between $6.5 and $8 million, depending on how they are broken down for sale. To put that in perspective, Hal, 99 kilos would provide on the street between 100,000 and 200,000 hits. The couple each pleaded not guilty to both charges of drug smuggling and possession for the purpose of trafficking. A jury of 12 people plus 2 alternates was selected. The trial is estimated to run until April 30th.
That was video journalist Naveen Day reporting from the Lethbridge Courthouse. Alberta has confirmed Canada's second blood clot case in a patient who received the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Dr. Dina Hinshaw says it's a male patient in his 60s who's recovering. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health says she's taking the event seriously but continues to recommend AstraZeneca. More than 700,000 doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine have now been administered across the country to date. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney tweeted that Alberta is lowering the minimum age to receive the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine from 55 to 40. Kenney says the decision is based on growing scientific knowledge and advice from the health community. Bookings for those who are wanting the vaccine will begin on Tuesday. The province's move comes after Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu said provinces and territories were free to use the AstraZeneca vaccine on any groups aged 18 and older, despite the country's National Advisory Committee on Immunization recommendation not to give the vaccine to those under the age of 55. With more Albertans being vaccinated by the summertime, we could see restrictions for large-scale events like the Calgary Stampede or Whoop Up Days in Lethbridge being lifted. But to what capacity? There's just no way of knowing just yet. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly spoke with officials at Exhibition Park about what a modified Whoop Up Days festival could look like this summer.
Exhibition Park is home to plenty of Southern Alberta staples, including Whoop Up Days. But right now, the building is host to Alberta Health Services' COVID-19 Immunization Centre. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney announced recently his optimism for large-scale events like the Calgary Stampede and Whoop Up Days.
As more people become immune, we'll be able to get back to normal faster. When about half of us have immunity, we're hoping to be able to raise capacity limits for gatherings. We're anticipating that we'll be able to gather together in larger groups.
With construction simultaneously taking place at the grounds for Southern Alberta's agri-food hub, Exhibition Park says the event would have looked different this year, regardless.
It won't be the full-scale Whoop Up Days that everyone's used to, strictly because of footprint on our site.
Event planners are handcuffed from releasing specifics for outdoor events, but say a limiting factor is national border closures. If Whoop Up Days can have live music, the talent will have to be homegrown.
There's so many talented, both Alberta and Southern Alberta, and right here in Lethbridge, musicians and entertainment acts. And so that is certainly what we're looking at for those potentials. There's a lot of layers to the onion that have really nothing to do with AHS and the Alberta restrictions and what the COVID situation is here, but nationally and internationally as well.
Exhibition Park is set to make an announcement on April 28th relating to COVID-19 friendly activities that they hope will take place this summer. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
An Edmonton man will put on his walking shoes and make a 500-kilometer trek from Lethbridge to Edmonton from July 7th through the 23rd. He's doing so to raise money and awareness in the battle against lung disease. As Micah Quinn explains now, this Walk to Breathe fundraiser holds a personal meaning for this walker.
July 23rd is a special day for Chris Sadler because it will mark the 5th anniversary that his father received a life-saving double lung transplant.
I didn't even know a double lung transplant was possible. I figured if you need a lung transplant, you're in a bad way. You need double. Well, that's not even possible. Sure enough, it is. And we're blessed to have world-class facilities. One of only 3 transplant centers in Canada is in Edmonton. So it was nice that I lived there. They could come stay with me as they needed to plan and recover. And, unfortunately, morbidity and mortality for lung disease is among the highest in Canada, yet here in Alberta, it receives less than a third of the funding that it actually needs to operate properly. So to me, it's very, very personal and very, very far reaching. I'm trying to hit every pocket, every person in Alberta and across the Northwest Territories that we can to let people know that, hey, this needs heightened awareness and we need to raise some funds and really spotlight lung disease in Alberta.
Sadler says that he'll be walking 30 kilometers per day over a 16-day period to get from Lethbridge to Edmonton, and he's hoping to raise $50,000 for the Lung Association of Alberta and Northwest Territories.
Give or take a little bit. Usually I'm in that 31, 32 kilometers a day before we rest. I can recuperate, ice and wrap and bandages, whatever I need to do. And again, it goes rain or shine, so no turning back now.
Last year, Sadler walked from Calgary and made his way to Edmonton. The fundraising goal was to get to $22,000, but that was surpassed quickly.
At the halfway point, we were notified that we had met our goal of 22,000. We decided, okay, 11-day walk. Let's make it a little bit higher, symbolic of the extra 11 days. So $33,000. We asked Albertans to help out, and we were able to meet and exceed that as well. So that was very, very exciting.
For more information on Sadler's Walk or to donate, you can visit ab.lung.ca/walk-to-breathe. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Manitoba is joining Alberta and Ontario in lowering the minimum age of an Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 shot to 40. The doses were previously only available to those 65 and older. It was also available to those with underlying health conditions between the ages of 55 and 64. According to the Manitoba government, close to 329,000 COVID-19 vaccine doses have been administered so far. All vehicles driving east from Manitoba today saw a checkpoint on the highway. It's meant to enforce COVID-19 restrictions that prohibit non-essential travel into Ontario. Police say everyone will be required to slow down at the provincial boundary, but not everyone will have to stop. Officials with the Ontario Provincial Police say commercial trucks will be waved through, and so will vehicles with Ontario license plates. People will be allowed through the checkpoints if they need to get to work or meet criteria for other exemptions. Hospitals in Ontario are responding to a growing number of critically ill COVID-19 patients. Healthcare workers in the ICU at Humber River Hospital in Toronto are stretched to the limit as they deal with patients in serious condition.
This was an illustration of what's happening on a daily basis in our hospital and any other ICUs across the town. People come in after a few days of having shortness of breath, difficulty breathing. They end up in the emergency department, subsequently end up on the medical floor, or directly then in the intensive care unit. And once things get out of hand, out of control, they end up like a lot of oxygen, and eventually they get intubated.
A lone bagpiper played outside of a church on Sunday as relatives of 22 people slain during a killer's rampage in Nova Scotia gathered for an emotional ceremony to remember the victims a year later. The somber event began with a province-wide moment of silence.
Getting up in the morning to go take your dogs out with, your husband having a gun ready because you can't even go out in your yard. For it to have gotten that far and for other people to have lost their lives and it not to be controlled. We need to work better and do better and just be better. There's so many unanswered questions that we all deserve. Emily was only 17. She was the youngest one besides the baby, that passed, and she had a whole life. She's such a bright future. She could do anything.
History was made on Monday as NASA's Mars experimental helicopter rose from the dusty red surface into the thin air. It became the first powered flight by an aircraft on another planet.
Ingenuity reporting having performed spin-up, takeoff, climb, hover, descent, landing, touchdown, and spin down. Altimeter data confirms that Ingenuity has performed its first flight of a powered aircraft to another planet.
That is pretty cool. Now, we had another cool day here in southwestern Alberta, but fortunately the warmer temperatures are just around the corner. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. We had sun mixed with cloud today, and some of the snow we saw on the weekend finally melted, which was nice to see. Tonight, expect just a few clouds developing with a low near -5. Tomorrow, expect a lot of clouds to clear out with a high near 10 degrees. Wednesday, the mercury will climb even higher, up to 17. A low pressure system returns on Thursday, bringing more clouds, a chance of rain mixed with snow, and a high of only 0. It should warm up to 5 degrees on Friday. Saturday, it'll be mainly cloudy with a high of 8. Sunday, a slight chance of rain developing with a high of 6 degrees. The average high for this time of year is 14 with an average low of 0. The highest temperature in this state was recorded in 1962 at 29 degrees, and the record low was -13 in 1951. The sun rose at 6:31 and it sets at 8:30. Looking at the national forecast for tomorrow now, expect just a few clouds and a high near 19 in Victoria, BC. Partly cloudy and 17 for Vancouver. It'll be mainly sunny in Calgary with a high near 11 on Tuesday. Sunshine and 15 for Edmonton. Just a few clouds and 3 degrees for Regina. Sunny and 7 degrees for Saskatoon. There's a good chance of light flurries and 0 for Winnipeg on Tuesday. Expect an overcast day and a high of only 0 in Toronto. A good chance of rain and 11 for both Ottawa and Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, it'll be a warm 18 degrees in Fredericton, New Brunswick with a chance of showers. Expect light rain as well and 16 in Halifax, Nova Scotia. A mixture of sun and cloud and 9 in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain mixed with snow and a high near 3 degrees on Tuesday.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403 380 1779.
Rogers customers across Canada reported problems with call and texting services earlier today. The national wireless carrier said in a Twitter post that it finally restored impacted services earlier this afternoon. A website that tracked outages says Rogers customers were reporting that they were unable to place or receive any cell phone calls or text messages for many hours. Down Detector says the problems earlier today were reported in most major Canadian cities and some of the smaller cities, including right here in Lethbridge. Expectations are high for the Canadian oil patch's first quarter results season. That was thanks in large part to a recovery in global demand. It comes a year after oil prices crashed to their first and only negative close, caused by technical market factors, pandemic lockdowns, and a price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Analysts say the energy sector is positioned in some of the healthiest ranks after companies were forced to reconsider capital spending habits, dividend policies, cash cost management, and operational practices. The annual pace of housing starts was up 21.6% in March over the previous month. It was mostly fueled by multi-unit dwellings. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the seasonally adjusted annual rate of starts climbed to 335,200 units last month. The pace of starts for apartments, condos, and duplexes climbed 33.8%, while single detached urban starts rose 3.6%. CMHC Chief Economist Bob Dugan says multifamily starts rebounded strongly following a decline in February, with Vancouver and Toronto seeing the biggest gains. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 146 points in the day to finish at 19,204. The Dow was down 123 points to 34,078. The S&P 500 was down 22 points to 4163. And the Nasdaq was down 137 points on the day to 13,915. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 30 cents to 63.43 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to 274 US. Gold was even at 1771.43 US an ounce, and silver ended the day at 25.82 US an ounce. Wheat is at $318 per metric ton, barley's at $329, canola's at $778, and corn is at $363 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 50 cents to $120.35. Feeder cattle were down $1.90 to $137.73. And lean hogs were up $3.18 to $105.65. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.80 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney tweeted that Alberta is lowering the minimum age to receive the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine from 55 down to 40. Kenney says the decision is based on growing scientific knowledge and advice from the health community. Bookings for those who are wanting the vaccine will begin on Tuesday. Now, this comes despite Alberta's confirmed blood clot case of a patient who received the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Dr. Dean Hinshaw says it's a male patient in his 60s who's recovering. What are some of the keys in being able to effectively communicate with millennials? Josh Burnett, who owned a restaurant and wrote the book Adulting 101 Book 2, has some ideas. He'll share them with us in just a moment.
Well, we live in a crazy world these days, and it can be a real challenge for our young people as they graduate from high school or college and step out into the real world. But what does it mean to be an adult anyway? And what kind of behavior should we be exhibiting? Joining me to discuss this is Josh Burnett. He is the owner of a Chick-fil-A restaurant in Yorktown, Virginia, and he's the co-author of the book Adulting 101, Book 2. Welcome to Bridge City News, Josh. So great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Jeanette. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, your first book, Adulting 101, #Wisdom for Life, became an Amazon bestseller. So what's different about this second book?
Sure. So the genesis of this whole project is, as a Chick-fil-A owner-operator, I have the privilege to work with a lot of students. And I quickly discovered that there was a real need in their lives to teach some of the life skills that perhaps they may or may not have received at home, and saw a noticeable impact to the business as a result of lacking some of those skills. And so I had this opportunity to come alongside of some of these team members and teach them these skills. And over the years, realized that this was such a crucial element of what I was doing. I had a chance to be a part of their progression and maturing into an adult. I realized that there is a need for this in the workplace in general, and had the chance to write Adulting 101 with a dear friend and mentor of mine, Pete Hardesty. And so the first book that we wrote is all about what an adult does. So some of the hard skills. So it's how to buy a car, it's how to budget, how to get a job. And after the release of the first book, we were hopeful we would sell more than just a couple of copies to our mothers, and it took off. We had a chance to do all right with that. The publisher came back and asked for a second book, and we began the journey of what could this look like. And with that, we engaged those same students, and they really we discovered there was really a need for clarity around what healthy adulthood looks like. And so it was a lot more of the soft skills that come alongside of that. And that is what the why that a second book exists.
Oh, that's amazing. What a niche to fill. And also being the owner of a Chick-fil-A, you are hiring those really young students, like some of them 14, 15 years old, I'm sure. Some of them probably not even quite in high school yet. So today's millennials are typically highly educated. We're talking some of the older ones maybe, but it seems that they're missing some key life skill strategies and perhaps some good character traits, kind of like what you were saying. Now, Josh, you point out that nearly a third of young people also suffer from anxiety. That's a really high number.
Yes. So I think there's a couple of things that are associated with that. There's a lot of young folks today that do struggle with anxiety, but it doesn't always have to go back to character traits that they did or did not learn. And for a lot of the young people, we are seeing the ramifications of how they were parented. So on different ends of the spectrum, you have parents that were very involved and sometimes overly involved in protecting their child. And we see the result of that as that young person adults, where they may not know how to do much or they don't know how to fail well. And so being self-aware of that. On the other end, some of these students out of necessity grew up in homes where parents weren't as engaged or as involved. And because of that, they also are struggling to launch effectively because it wasn't modeled well. So what I'm running into is I have great-hearted young people that want to do the right thing, but really desire a model of what that healthy adulthood looks like. And that's what we hope to provide to them in book 2.
That's great. Now, what advice do you have for the 20-somethings to enable them to mature and to overcome the tendency to worry so much and worry that they're not living, so that they're not living in a state of anxiety constantly?
The first half of the book is really geared around this model of knowing yourself and then leading yourself, and then knowing others and leading others. And by being able to do those effectively, we think that you will mature into a healthy adult. This is a great launching point, a great discussion guide for people to come alongside of those students and to really use this as a resource along that journey with them. But for a lot of the students I work with, a big piece of it's self-awareness. So they have a desire to be who they want to be, and you need to accept me for me. And what I try to share with them is being self-aware is so much more than that. It's really figuring out who you are in a deeper level and showcasing that for them so that they can launch more healthily into adulthood. So a lot of that anxiety can stem from not really knowing where their value comes from and trying to find it in all of these other areas that they think will give them life.
Interesting. Now, one of the issues that you tackle in the book also is social media. And of course, that can be a huge source of anxiety for teens and young people. So many teens and millennials do spend so much time in front of a screen. So how does this affect them? And is there a way to rein in that screen time and become more inclined to do things face to face?
I think that it extends far beyond just the current generation, millennials. That everybody is addicted to their phone on some level.
Especially nowadays, right? When we're
absolutely
all working from
everything.
home. Yeah.
And school is on a screen now. And so
Exactly.
it's very easy to be so absorbed into that world where we miss that human connection. So Pete and I, again, kind of provide some high-level insight into, hey, here are some tips and tricks on how to use that screen time effectively, or how to really be able to push it away a little bit from what you're doing, whether there's a number of apps that can help you to turn off some of these social apps so that you're not on them scrolling mindlessly for a long period of time. And encouraging you to get outside and engage with other people. And you can't replace that human interaction. And I think the more people hide behind a screen, the more anxious they can become. And so we try to touch on technology and screen time and social media, and even the comparisons that come as a result of that, and what that can do to somebody's mental health if all they do is look at Instagram and see the best day of somebody's life every single time they get on the app.
Exactly. And it's so unrealistic, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah. Now, I wonder, like in past generations, some of us were more likely to have maybe some personal mentors or someone more mature in life who would teach us and lead us into maturity. Would something like this be helpful for our mental health?
Always.
Yeah.
Anytime you can get somebody a little further ahead of you to engage with you and care for you and show you what's coming down the line, the better off we all will be. And so that's certainly something that we encourage, and that's a desire and hope of mine as a leader of a lot of young people, is to some degree get a chance to be that for them. But I think the more that we can really build up our inner circle, both of peers and of mentors that we want to be similar to and alike, I think the better off we all are.
Absolutely. Now, you point out that much of the younger generation has that entitlement mentality. Can you explain what that looks like and how we got there? And how do we go about changing that mindset too? That's a tough one.
I don't want to make it too broad where it's very easy to label and say this generation's entitled. I think this generation has just grown up in the age of instant. Everything I want or need, I can access very quickly. And if it's not immediate, then I'll just move on to the next thing. And whether this is food or Amazon Prime or even relationships, we see this, there's not much of a desire to build that resilience, to really build that grit out, to do more, to do better, to stay in a relationship with somebody. Because in my pocket, I can pull out my phone and be connected with billions of people anywhere in the world at any time.
That is so true. How do we go about changing this mindset though?
I really think that due to these massive societal shifts where our networks have increased so dramatically, so despite this connection, we're seeing the loneliest generation that we've ever seen. So statistically, students today are more lonely than they've ever been, despite increased connection or communication rather. So all this communication, very little connection. And so within the book, through the loneliness chapters, we kind of talk about this friend formula. And it's not rocket science, but it's really initiating and getting out there, being real and vulnerable with the people that you're living life with, and just taking that first step. So we give some tips and tricks on how to do that and organizations to get plugged in with, but really it just takes going out there and making a personal human connection, even if it's a little awkward. This was true of my wife and I. We were newly married and we moved to a state that we had no connections to at all. And so we didn't have family around, we didn't have any friends. And it was on us to get out and engage and find a place to be known and to find friends.
There you go, huh? Just stepping out of that comfort zone. Not easy to do. Now, you write that we need to know ourselves and know others because we live in a highly sensitive culture where our words and our beliefs are scrutinized. It's so true. And it's important to be aware of the changing culture, our choice of words, and who our audience is. That's a tough one, huh?
Yes, it really is. And I see this play out in the business world a good deal. So we serve thousands of people every day and across all kinds of socioeconomic statuses, races, religions, creeds, whatever it might be. And the ability to connect on a human level with somebody is so critical as an employer and also as somebody that's serving a community. And so we have a chance to dig into that a little bit and teach self-awareness to this generation, as well as just emotional intelligence and maturity. When I look at people that have come through my restaurant and my organization into leadership, the skill that is oftentimes the biggest struggle is being able to be emotionally intelligent and to engage in a way that both parties can walk away from that time feeling better and feeling heard. And if we can help to solve that even a little bit, then this book will have done its job.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've all experienced failures, and you suggest that it's important to learn from our mistakes and that it can bring us to a place of becoming resilient. That makes sense.
Yes, I think learning how to fail well and be okay with that is such a critical aspect that oftentimes, as I alluded to earlier, is missing. And it's missing because we want it to be right, we want it to be now, and if it's not that way, we'll just move on. There was a sign that went viral a few years ago of a local Catholic boys' school out in Little Rock, and there was a sign on the front door that said, "Stop. If you are bringing your son's homework, their lunch, their equipment, whatever it might be, turn around and go home. Your son will be fine, and they will figure out how to problem solve in your absence." And I think this is just a great reminder, whether you're parenting somebody that's launching into adulthood, or if you're that person trying to launch yourself, that failures are really okay. And to encourage some of these soft failures, especially if you have a teenager in the house where they have a chance to live life and to make mistakes, but still while the stakes are low. And this fear of failure can have a tendency to drive us to some of these harder failures where we never want to make a mistake. And then when we do, it really hurts. So the earlier we can figure out how to fail and be okay with that and learn from it and move on, I think we build grit and resiliency and also a little bit of wisdom.
Yeah, so no more of that helicopter parenting. That's no good.
Yeah.
Now, you touched on this earlier with social media and screen time and building connection versus just, for surface communication. So many of us might have hundreds or even thousands of friends on social media. So any final thoughts on how to choose genuine, real life friends?
Oh, goodness. I think that the importance of friends is unparalleled in life. So you're going to go the way your friends go. And so finding people that have similar belief systems and values as you can be a very critical element in that. Do they have similar likes, similar stages of life? And finding people that you want to be more like. You don't want to be around a group that is bringing you down. So look for organizations in the community that you agree with and that you want to be a part of, and that is a great launching point. But a lot of times folks will leave high school or college where their friends were always built in to their normal daily cadence, and they'll hit that point afterwards where my friends are no longer provided for me. How do I go about finding folks that I want to work with and engage with? And outside of the workplace, you really have to be proactive in that. And I say all that, and it is so crucial also to find a diverse group of people that you can be around and learn from as well. But at the end of the day, you want your friend, your inner group to be people that you want to be more like.
Absolutely. Great advice. Josh Burnett is the co-author of the book, Adulting 101, Book 2. Thanks so much for being with us today, Josh. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
The Alberta economy is still going through some pretty tough times. We have the recession, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the lockdowns. But how has this really impacted the real estate market? To talk a bit more about it, talking about buying and selling here in southwestern Alberta, is Sean Ormston, CEO of Great Rate Realty. Sean, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Now, Sean, we all know how devastated the oil and gas sector has been. It's really impacted real estate and businesses in Calgary, Red Deer, but not as much here in southwestern Alberta. We're more agriculture based. Have you noticed a bit of a difference with the economy, especially when it comes to buying and selling a property?
No, I have noticed even over the years, as the economy goes in southern Alberta, we're pretty consistent, and that's a good thing because people can rely on stability in the market. And that's something that hopefully they can plan for. We like to plan for things, and it's nice to have stability in the market. So we get that in Southern Alberta.
So what are we at right now in Lethbridge specifically? Are we seeing more of a buyer's or a seller's market right now?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the last decade, we've probably been mostly in a buyer's market, but we are transitioning. Some of the power is now falling to the sellers. And we can see that. I was looking at some numbers today. We've got home sales that are up about 50% this year so far. Wow. From last year's numbers. We have sale price of an average of $320,000, and last year where it was $285,000. So we have about a 12% increase in sale price as well. So things are on the up and up.
Well, that's good news. Now, let's talk about some of the bigger markets in Canada. We've seen massive increases in property values, including what we see in Vancouver and Toronto. But what about Lethbridge? Do you see more of a slow, steady increase, maybe 2 to 3 points per year when it comes to building equity?
You know, what we've seen in the past is up years and down years, very, very small, 1%, 2%. So not a lot changes. Sometimes we get 2%, 3%. We can string together a few years where it feels like we're getting a lift. And then we might have kind of a balancing that, things balance out. But this year, this is the time we're seeing, like I said, a 12% increase in the first sort of 3 months of the year, 2.5 months since we've got going this year.
Now, we've seen record low interest rates, Sean, under 2 points for a 5-year closed mortgage. Do you think this trend will continue? What are your thoughts?
Well, we were seeing interest rates. We've got some mortgage brokers in our office. We were seeing rates getting down as low as 1.5%, which was unbelievable only in the last month. However, we've seen money also flow into the bond market recently. When money flows into the bond market, that's what drives interest rates higher. And, you know, things are around that 2% that you mentioned. But I think we'll see that for a sustained period of time, as the Bank of Canada seems to always announce that their interest rate is on hold, at least in recent months, recent years. I anticipate that interest rates will remain low for a sustained period of time.
Is a variable rate mortgage still a good option in our current market?
You know, I always tell people consult with your bank, consult with your mortgage broker when looking at rates. If you look historically, it always seemed that variable rates were better, but the margin to me, in my opinion, is so thin on variable rate mortgage now. It doesn't seem like it would make a lot of sense to choose a variable rate over a fixed rate.
Now, I locked in my mortgage a couple of years ago, a 5-year close for 2.79%. I thought, hey, that's a pretty good buy, pretty good deal, right? More goes to the principal, less to the interest. Is it maybe a good time right now to renegotiate a blended mortgage with rates so low to try and get closer to that 2% mark?
You know, every mortgage, from what I've learned from mortgage brokers, sort of informing me, is a little bit different. And there are penalties in each mortgage. There are prices that you have to pay to get out of these products. So when it comes to refinancing, I think you have to be very careful. You have to meet with your mortgage professional, meet with your bank, and really run the numbers to make sure that it's a good idea to either refinance or step into a blended product.
Now, you mentioned earlier the average price is what, around $320,000? So I guess people that have homes, $250,000 to $300,000, they're selling a lot faster?
Yeah, we're starting to see the days on market and the inventory drop, especially in the 200,000 to 400,000 range, where affordability is apparent. Even though the homes above 400,000, we're also seeing a jump in the number of units sold. I just had a look at those numbers, and those numbers are quite staggering. Last year to this point, there were 32 homes that sold. This year in Lethbridge, this year there are 77. So a jump of about 140%. So it sounds like a big number. Prices are about the same. I looked at an average about 477,000 for 485,000 for those homes that are in the upper price range. But as you mentioned, most homes are selling in the 200,000 to 400,000 range, and they're selling in fewer days on market this year than last year.
So what do you attribute the hot market to? Is it that maybe people are working from home more often now? They want bigger office space? Is they're working maybe a hybrid? What are people telling you right now?
I think it's a combination of things. The interest rates being low are fantastic. That's something that people can really get excited about because they can lock in a low rate and have lower payments as long as they qualify at the stress test that is put in place by the government. I think the pandemic has made a lot of people realize, or a lot of people have been forced to work from home. And so while they sit in their houses, they're thinking about, gee, I need more space, or, we really need to have a spot for the office, or something like that, where people might have a continued period of time where they are working from home. And thirdly, which I don't think a lot of people talk about, is we also have a large group of buyers, younger buyers, that are sort of coming of age into the market. Many of these buyers are, we might refer them as millennial buyers. They're under 35 years old right now, but a lot of them went to school. They had school debt to pay off. They had to wait a little later in life to buy homes. And now we have a large demographic that I believe is coming into the market in all centers, ready to buy their first home, somewhere between the age of 30 and 35 years old.
Let's talk about different areas of Lethbridge which seem to be more popular. I know people here that work at the station, they love the north side. Other people prefer the south side with the big trees, the bigger lots, but you get older homes. And then still there are others who love the west side because the newer homes and you're close to the ATB Center. And it seems to be more high density on the west side. What are you seeing right now?
Well, it's interesting. The west side has definitely grown the biggest in Lethbridge. There are as many people on the west side of Lethbridge now as there are on the north and the south combined.
Wow.
So a lot of the growth in the city over the past year has been on the west side. That's what really propelled this city into a 100,000 plus population as we've seen that growth. So people are choosing to live over there that want those newer homes, want those newer neighborhoods. There are newer neighborhoods, of course, on the north and south. Typically, the west side gives people a really good bang for their buck, and amenities have been developing on the west side. To your point about the ATB Center and the shopping that's come as the years have gone by.
You know, it's funny, I live on the west side and we're saying, we need a Walmart. You know, we need a Walmart superstore there. And so, you know, we've been campaigning for that. I kind of envy people on the south side because you got all of the amenities right there. It's amazing. And the beautiful mature trees. I really love that. Sean, during the COVID-19 pandemic, are people a little hesitant to venture out to open houses or maybe showings right now? What are you seeing?
You know, there's been really good leadership and guidance from the Alberta Real Estate Association on how to handle showings, viewings during the COVID pandemic. Obviously, everybody's worried about, contact and services. So the Alberta Real Estate Association has mandated that realtors, when showing homes, only bring 2 people with them on each showing. And so if you have a party, even kids involved, we're swapping people out of, in and out of the house to make sure everybody gets to see the home that needs to see the home, whether that's the buyers, the parents, whoever. We're only taking in 2 people at a time. Everybody's masked up, everybody's sanitizing. We advise sellers to leave all the lights on, all the interior doors open, to limit the touching of surfaces. So I think everybody in our industry has done a really good job to pay attention to what we can do as licensed real estate agents, as well as follow the guidance of the Alberta Real Estate Association to make sure we're keeping people safe.
Now, you mentioned stress tests earlier, Sean. Talk a bit about stress tests and the tougher mortgage requirements. How do they actually work?
Well, I have a love-hate relationship with the stress test as a realtor, and I understand why the government put it in. They put in an interest rate that is more expensive to qualify at. So what they're trying to do is protect people from borrowing too much money. However, as a realtor, I get concerned that there could be some overstepping because the interest rates are so low today. People can lock in money, like we talked about, around 2%. And so I've ran some numbers with the mortgage brokers who are in my office next door, and we've looked at things, and for a 5% down buyer, they're losing about 30% buying power on the price of the home they can purchase because they're having to qualify for the stress test. And that's difficult in a place like Southern Alberta. I wish that the government would take an approach to stress testing for the much higher dollar value homes where it does matter. And I'm not saying where it has to be 500,000, maybe $1 million, whatever it is. We are seeing markets like Toronto and Vancouver where prices are north of $1 million for an average home. And that's just not the case in Southern Alberta, like we talked about. Average so far for the year is 320,000.
Have you seen what you get in Vancouver, though, for $1 million or $1.5 million? You don't get a lot. It's a little bungalow, maybe 700 square foot, built in the 60s. It's a fixer-upper. Think about what you can get here in Lethbridge in southwestern Alberta for $1 million. Now, Sean, if the stress test was removed altogether for the more stable markets like we have here in Lethbridge, how much of a difference do you think that would make for buyers?
Well, I think it would make a huge difference. Like I said, it's about, for your 5% down buyers, people coming into the market, first-time home buyers, it's about 30% more buying power. So, a $300,000 mortgage purchase could be a $400,000 purchase. It's that much of a difference. And there is a big difference in the quality and caliber of home from $300,000 to $400,000. Now, would we expect the market to also lift in prices? Absolutely, we would. So it's just we're in the same boat though as everybody else. Everybody is required to follow the stress test rules in the country, and so we're no different, and buyers just have to navigate that at this point in time.
Are you noticing maybe a decline in younger people looking for homes because of the stress test?
I think some younger people are discouraged because they have to qualify at such a higher rate, and previous generations haven't had to do this stress test. I think, you know, as long as you're borrowing fixed money for at least a 5-year term in Canada, I don't know that any of us can predict the future much more than 5 years anyway. So I'd like to see whatever that rate is to be the one that they can actually qualify for. So I think, to your point, there is some discouragement, but like I said, it's the world we live in, and we don't make the rules, we just have to live by them.
Now let's talk about advice you have for a young couple looking at buying their very first home. We had a couple of young couples here at the station bought their very first home. It was beautiful to see. But it's more than just the 5% down, isn't it? You've got the legal fees for your real estate lawyer. I mean, there's so much more, isn't it?
There is a little bit more. You know, legal fees can run somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 when you're purchasing a home. You also have to think about the property tax situation. That's the one that's often forgotten about, is at what point in the year are the property taxes due? And so while the property taxes are calculated to the day, depending on the time of year you buy, you may have to come to the closing table with a check to shore those up. Or in some cases, if you're buying earlier on in the year, you may receive a check from the sellers for the time they've occupied the home up to that point, to which you'll have a nice big property tax bill due in June anyways. So you do need to plan for these things.
You know, Sean, some people actually co-purchase a home, joining up with friends, parents, or siblings to share the mortgage. Are you seeing more of an increase in this type of home buying right now to make it more affordable?
You know, in our market, I think things are pretty stable with that. Most home buyers are the only ones on the purchase contract. We do see co-signing from parents that are jumping in to help their kids buy a home. But I think in markets where prices are a lot more expensive than ours, you see a lot more of that. I looked at some statistics for markets like Toronto, Vancouver, and some of these expensive markets, and as much as 2/3 of all buyers are needing a co-signer to be able to purchase those very expensive homes. In Lethbridge, the nice thing we love about Lethbridge is that it's affordable, and $300,000, $320,000 is still a very affordable price tag in Canadian housing when average home prices across the country are flirting with $500,000.
How well are some of the bedroom communities doing around Lethbridge, like Coaldale, Raymond, and even Nobleford?
I think they all have, there's all various reasons to move to these communities, of course, and people like the smaller town life. Places like Coaldale, you know, it's really big lots that are out there for even the new building areas.
There's a great
like
bakery out there too, we
Nobleford,
can't forget, right?
there is a great bakery out of Coaldale, absolutely. And Nobleford is a neat place because their property taxes are so low. And so if you are looking at your overall cost to live, that's a place where almost everybody's property taxes are under $1,000 a year. And so, and still you're on, you know, city water, municipal water and sewer, which is important to people. So places like that people that want the small town life, I think those places will flourish.
Sean, we only have about a minute left here. Let's talk about floor plans. As you get older, like myself, I'm not a big fan of the 2 stories anymore. 15 steps up, 16 steps down, 31 steps. I'm out. That's it. I'm done. I bought a bi-level. People love bungalows. What are you seeing right now? Are the baby boomers and the Gen Xers preferring less steps?
I think as everyone gets older, they prefer less steps. That's sort of seems to be the trend. Once in a while, we get folks that some seniors that are really fit and they want the 2 stories. They want to do those steps every day because they think that that's something that's going to help them in their activity. But I think most of us prefer one level living as we get older. So we're seeing that desire. But the flip side to that is land is at a premium. And when land is at a premium for new housing and new development, the builders would prefer 2-story homes because that's what they can fit in some of the lots that are provided. To get bigger homes, they have to be 2-story. So we're seeing a good mix out there. Of course, lots of bungalow and bi-level buyers, but as time goes on, especially when we go back to the west side where all the new development is, majority of those homes are two-story homes.
And we can't forget about the 4-level and 3-level splits too, right? Great talking real estate with you, Sean. Thanks so much. Sean Ormston, CEO of Great Rate Realty. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks very much for having me on.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.